Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Poland scrambles fighter jets as Russia launches over 600 drones and dozens of missiles at Ukraine, killing 3 people. Israeli forces are under scrutiny after a Palestinian teen was shot in the West Bank. And President Trump defends Bill Clinton as Epstein photos spark criticism from prominent figures. Now, Poland scrambled fighter jets after Russia launched airstrikes near the Ukrainian border. The attacks, involving more than 600 drones and dozens of missiles, hit energy facilities and caused power outages. 3 people were killed in the strikes, including a 4-year-old child. The strikes come after Ukraine was accused of targeting a Russian general. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Oleksandr Merezhko, head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament. Doctor, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. So Russia launched another major deadly missile and drone attack on Ukraine after US-led peace talks ended in Miami. What is the feeling on the ground right now?
Thank you for having me. The thing is that we are being bombarded by Russia almost each night and even during the day. We had this day, not only early in the morning, we were woken up by the explosions and sounds of air raid sirens going off, but also during the day. And it's no coincidence. First of all, Russia is trying to destroy our power grid and to bomb us into submission. During the winter, they want to destroy our facilities and to break our resilience. At the same time, it's a very clear signal that Putin has absolutely no intention to stop fighting, to stop the war and to negotiate in earnest. But despite everything, despite all these atrocities and crimes committed by Russians, Ukraine continues to hold on, continues to fight, and we are not going to surrender.
And as I did say, I mentioned the talks in Miami. Zelenskyy has spent many weeks holding talks with his European and, of course, US counterparts. Why are we no closer to an agreement? And who can break this deadlock in talks that we appear to be having right now?
The reason remains the same, and this reason has its name. It's Putin himself, because Putin doesn't want to stop aggression against Ukraine. He will never agree even to ceasefire, which would allow Ukraine to exist as independent sovereign state. He's totally obsessed with destroying Ukraine. He wants to restore Soviet empire, and he also wants, as a next step, to reestablish hegemony in Europe. That's why he's absolutely not interested. He's pushing absolutely unacceptable for Ukraine demands, for example, with regard to withdrawing Ukrainian troops from our territory, from the rest of the Donetsk Oblast. He understands that Ukrainian people, Ukrainian parliament and president will never agree to anything like that. But on his part, it's a provocation, and he's also trying to put the blame on Ukraine for not wanting peace. But the truth is that he can stop fighting very easily, just stop this aggression against Ukraine and withdraw troops.
But Dr. Oleksandr, my question also is, do you think that President Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff should be putting more pressure on the Russian President Vladimir Putin to also stop the killing, to make things more difficult for Russia?
I believe we should return to the initial peace proposal by President Trump himself. I would like to remind our audience that his initial idea was about unconditional ceasefire, and Ukraine had agreed. At the same time, it was rejected by Putin. And later, President Trump promised many times and even had established lots of deadlines with regard to implementing sanctions against Russia and also against Russian allies, which provide lifeline to Russian war machine, but he never delivered on his previous promise. As for Mr. Witkoff, unfortunately, he's making statements which indicate that he doesn't understand what's going on, or maybe he's under influence of Putin.
President Zelenskyy says draft peace documents are ready, including proposals on security guarantees after those talks in Miami. He said this today. Are you optimistic the US will agree to these new proposals drawn up by Ukraine and that they won't anger Russia?
The key question remains the same with regard to security guarantees. What can stop Putin from attacking Ukraine again? And the only realistic answer to this question as of now is NATO membership for Ukraine. And we continue to struggle, we continue to fight for membership, NATO membership, because we understand that's the only thing which can prevent Putin from attacking us. At the same time, I'm not sure what President Trump can offer instead of NATO membership. Whether it will be as good as NATO membership for us, I'm absolutely not sure about that.
But in reality, NATO membership seems to be something that's very far away. And it's even come out of Ukraine that they will no longer pursue NATO membership if it means that they can reach some sort of peace deal with Russia. So NATO membership, from my understanding, is completely off the table, is it not?
It's not on the table for a number of reasons. First of all, we understand that's the only credible and reliable security guarantee which can save us from extermination by Russia. Second, we were promised several times at the summits, NATO summits. I quote, for example, Bucharest Summit 2008, which says that doors of NATO are open for Ukraine, or Summit in Vilnius, which states that it's an irreversible path for Ukraine to join NATO. So since we have been promised this, we keep believing in these promises.
And lastly, was the car bomb blast that killed a Russian general in Moscow yesterday orchestrated by Ukraine?
In such situations, our special services don't confirm and they don't refute or don't deny such kind of information. But at the same time, I would like to emphasize only one point. Each Russian war criminal, sooner or later, one way or another, will be brought to justice, including Putin himself.
Dr. Oleksandr Merezhko, as always, thank you for your analysis, your insights and your time. Let's continue this conversation with Sergei Markov, former public spokesman for President Putin. Sergei, great to have you on the show. Has Vladimir Putin suffered a huge loss after the death of a general yesterday who was killed in a Moscow car bomb attack? We just heard there from the Ukrainian side.
Of course, it's a big tragedy, and it's using of terroristic methods by Ukrainian illegal neo-colonial repressive regime. We know it's very well that Russia can, of course, kill Ukrainian generals in Kiev, but Russia not doing this because this some kind of terrorist attack. And Ukrainian regime used terrorist attack already few years. We try to protect us. It's the simple difference between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is normal, normal country with civilian government, and Ukraine is neo-colonial repressive regime which use terrorism as normal political forms of activity. Same, I would say, about pirate attack against in neutral waters against Russian oil shadow fleet. Russia also never used pirate methods against Ukraine. So it's that's why it's the reason of the war. Russia not fighting for territories. Russia are fighting for stopping illegal, repressive, terroristic regime in Ukraine, which is clear threat to Russia, clear threat to the Ukrainian people. And by the way, about security guarantee of Ukraine, of course, it should be, but it's very simple. Political system of Ukraine should come back to the situation before 2014, when Ukraine was democratic, independent, neutral country. You may know that from 1991 until 2014, Ukraine has absolutely zero security problems with Russia. Why? Because Ukraine was democratic, neutral, independent country. After Ukraine became under the dictatorship of neo-colonial, repressive, Russophobic regime, it appears to be with big problems in security. And by the way, this also open for us understanding what the conditions of the peace deal for Donald Trump should be. If this peace deal will stop terroristic character of the Ukrainian regime, Russia will agree. If this deal will preserve these terroristic methods, Russia, of course, will have to deny it. It's very simple.
I just want to break down some of what you said to me there. First of all, you said to me, Russia is a normal country with a normal government. But I want to ask you, if you are a normal country with a normal government, why did Russia launch a deadly overnight attack on Ukraine, which killed 3 people, and one of those person who was killed was a 4-year-old child? Russia is systematically attacking civilians in Ukraine.
It's big tragedy for us, because for us, you may know, Ukrainians, they're Russians. And Ukraine was part of the Russia during 1,000 years, and Kiev was Russian capital during 3 centuries. And Leonid Brezhnev and Khrushchev and another leader of the big Soviet Union, all of them have been Ukrainians. So for us, it's civil war, and for us, it's a big tragedy. Russian army not killing civilians. Russians very much targeting only military and infrastructure targets. It's, by the way, big difference with Ukrainian army, who has the goal and target to kill civilians. You maybe didn't know, didn't visit it. I visited Donetsk few times, and I personally, different conferences, round tables, so on. And I wake up every night in the Donetsk because of shelling by Ukrainian artillery. It continued 10 years from 2014, when neo-Nazi took power in Ukraine with American and British help. So it's terrorist attack every night, continue on against Donetsk by Ukrainian illegal regime all this year. This is big difference. I would say again, Russia government is normal government who try to save lives of the civilians. Ukrainian government is terroristic government who has goal to threaten, who has goal to have fear in the souls of the civilians.
It's really interesting that you do say that, because when we look at this war, Russia was the aggressor. Russia started the attack on Ukraine, and you can try to frame it whichever way you want to, Sergei, but the reality is that Russia was the aggressor from the beginning. And you can say that you feel bad that people have died inside of Ukraine, but if you feel that bad, Russia can just stop bombing.
Russia will stop bombing immediately when Ukrainian regime and its Western masters would agree with Russian very simple condition. Stop political repression against Russian people in Ukraine, stop political repression against Russian language, Russian culture, stop political repression against Orthodox Church, and stop terroristic neo-Nazi practices of Ukrainian government. After this Russian military operation in Ukraine should be, it's something like a military operation of American, British, and Soviet troops on the German territory. As Vladimir Putin told many times, this war started not 2014, it started 2000. It didn't start 2022. It started 2014 act, and it was a war against Donbass. Russia sent the troop to send people in Donbass from the terroristic military pressure of Ukrainian regime. It's very simple.
Sergei Markov, always great to have you on the show. Thank you for your time. The Israeli military is reviewing the killing of 16-year-old Palestinian in Kababatiyah. The Israeli soldier who shot the teen claimed he was throwing bricks, but CCTV footage shows he was not. The shooting adds to rising tensions in the West Bank, where dozens of minors have been killed this year alone. For more on this, I'm joined from the West Bank by Fatah spokesman Ahmed Fattouh. Thank you so much for joining me, Ahmed. Great to have you on the show. So I just want to begin with Israeli soldiers have shot and killed a teenager in the West Bank, they say, hurled a block at them. But CCTV footage shows something very, very different. What do you believe happened to this young man?
Thank you for having me. And I have to note that Israel is killing Palestinians without any accountability for the past 77 years. This is a norm within the Israeli occupation forces and a norm within the Israeli fascist government. They killed a teenager in plain sight. And that is not something that is out of the ordinary. And suddenly, unfortunately, it is the ordinary within the Israeli occupation. They had killed another teenager 2 days ago in Nablus, and before that in Jenin. In the past month alone, more than 1,000 have been killed. This is a catastrophic situation we have here. Israeli occupation is just have orders to kill, then ask questions. They don't abide with any international law. They don't abide with any international humanitarian law. And they are just going in with their fascist and extremist mentality to colonize and threaten the lives of Palestinians and daily life in their aim to push the Palestinians out of their lands. So this is a scheme that's going on since October 7 and before October 7. In 2022, by the way, it was the highest number of casualties between Palestinian children. Israel killed the highest number of children before October 7. Of course, they always break their records every year, and in October 7, since now they committed this heinous genocide. So we are in front of a case of a state that does not respect the humanitarian law, that does not respect their own law. They have a double law, a law that works for the Jewish and a law that works for the Palestinians. This is an apartheid system, a court and a judge who is the prosecutor and the persecutor. So it is, this condition is going on, and we are unfortunately amid this international silence and impunity that need to change in order for this criminality and these war crimes day after day to stop. It is a clear case and the evidence is wide, and I hope the international community would move.
How frustrating is it that the international community is staying silent after we saw many countries recognizing a Palestinian state in the past to make sure a two-state solution could be something that could eventually be reached? Do you want to hear more from the international community, from the US, from Europe, from various other countries?
Of course. You know, after 2 years of starving children to death and bombarding every red line, crossing every red line and bombarding hospitals, schools, refugees, everything in the West Bank, the colonial settlements, settlers' terrorism, the torture of prisoners, the rape of prisoners, the killing of teenagers, the killing of children, every crime in the book Israel has committed. And the international community continue to be silent, continue to be paralyzed in front of these crimes. Where is the accountability, we ask? Where is the international law when it's Israel breaking it? When any other state is breaking the law, suddenly there is the force of democracy and there is the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice to work against it. But here we have an Israeli government. Its leaders wanted for the ICC. It has a case of genocide in the ICJ, and yet they receive all kinds of impunity from the international community and receive all kinds of funds and support from prominent countries in the world. Where is justice, we ask? If that will continue, what is the end game? Do they think what is the end game of this? What is the mentality of the Zionist fascist religious extremist ideology think that will be the end game. The end game will be explosion in the whole region. If they think that terrorizing and killing the Palestinian people will make them just leave their lands and flee, that is false. In 1948, 70% of the Palestinians were ethnic cleansed from their lands. That did not stop the Palestinian cause. That started the Palestinian cause and started the longest modern revolution in history. And today, Israel is committing these heinous crimes while the Palestinian Authority is still extending its hand for peace. And the Arabs are extending their hand for peace. And Trump has signed the Gaza peace plan, but Israel continues to violate it. We have a clear image who is the violator, who is the occupation, who is the colonizer, who is the war criminal. But where is the war to act? Without the intervention of the global community, I'm afraid this will lead us to explosion that will affect the whole region and would retaliate to the entire world. This is a serious condition, and the world need to bring attention and to stop this double standards policy against the Palestinians and the Arabs.
Ahmed, I guess Israel's argument in this would be the fact that Hamas continues to violate the ceasefire agreement. It continues to do that. We are still seeing violence in Gaza. Hamas is still present. They haven't disarmed in Gaza at the moment. It's still in a difficult place. Have you been speaking to Hamas and putting pressure on them to lay down their weapons, to abide by the ceasefire agreement?
I believe these are false pretexts that Netanyahu and the Israeli government are using to continue and postpone phase one. With every differences we have with Hamas, they have no serious threat against Israel. The weapon is not a serious threat. Let's be honest with ourselves. A bunch of AK-47s and small weapons is not a threat to a nuclear power state. And we have said that we want the Hamas to step down from power. The Arabs, and through the Arab League, has accepted the Arab Islamic Agreement, which later was adopted in the New York, which is known as New York Declaration by the majority of the world, which says that Hamas would step down from power and submit their weapons to a Palestinian Authority, and then for the Palestinian Authority to return through a technocratic apolitical committee to administer Gaza, and for Hamas to leave the governing scene. Hamas also has signaled that they will do that. But Israel is giving every pretext to stay in Gaza, and they are saying it out loudly. Just today, Katz, the Minister of Defense of Israel, said that we will not withdraw from Gaza, not ever. That's their plan. Smotrich says that we want to Judaize Gaza. They wanted to make it a Jewish land. They want to remove the Palestinians. He said before, we want the maximum land and the minimum population, meaning the Palestinian population. Netanyahu said in every setting that he's against the Palestinian state. They are saying it in the parliament. They are voting for bills that call for annexation, for bills that calling for the settlements. 19 new settlements now has been declared. This brings the total of 166 colonial settlements and 255 outpost settlements. This has nothing to do with Hamas weapons. This has nothing to do with one dead body left that Hamas cannot find. This is only a scheme for occupation and colonization that is not actually secret to anyone. We can see it in daylight. So it needs serious intervention from the international community. And by the way, it's Israel that's violating 5 terms within the Gaza peace plan agreement. They violate point 3 because they still bombard Gaza and still shooting at civilians and killing civilians, which says clearly in point 3 of that term that they should stop all military operation. They are violating term 7 and 8 about the humanitarian aid. They're still crippling the humanitarian aid and not allowing shelters and medicine to go to Gaza. We have people and children, infants are dying from cold. Where's the humanity from that? And they are violating point 19 of the agreement, which says about the Palestinian self-determination ambitions and to go for a peaceful solution. They refuse to sit with the PLO, the legitimate representative and authority of the Palestinian people, and they refuse to abide with the two-state solution, and they refuse the Palestinian state. They even refuse to recognize there's a Palestinian people. This is how delusional the extremist fascist Zionism is. And the world is watching and silent and blaming the Palestinian. That would be a charade.
Just quickly, before I let you go, Israel's finance minister says Netanyahu must convince Trump to back the West Bank annexation during his upcoming US trip? Because we know Benjamin Netanyahu will be going to visit Donald Trump. Do you think Donald Trump is going to change his mind on the West Bank? Because he says the annexation of that is completely off the cards.
President Trump was pretty clear before. He said there is no annexation and there will never be. They tried to pressure through their lobby, through their influence, through their partners, through their bribe politicians in the Congress to push the idea of the annexation of the West Bank since not for the last 2 months, since years, since decades, but it was refused. Because this is not just only a catastrophic crime against humanity, this is also an explosion to the whole region. If they annex the West Bank, occupy Gaza, where will we go? That will return us to point zero, to go before the two-state solution peace process, which began in 1994. We will go to square zero, where there is a liberation struggle against occupation. Nobody wants that, and especially the region. And the Americans are very clear. The United States have said we want to go with a political framework to go for a two-state solution and to fulfill the Palestinian ambitions of self-determination. That was clearly mentioned in point 19 of the agreement, and is clearly this is the clear position of the Arab world and the Europeans. It is only Israel that want this expansion and colonialism, and they extended their colonialist arms to Lebanon, Syria, and they wish to go to Iran to an indefinite war. This cycle of war and expansion of Israel is there since 1948. It's time for it to stop, and for the reasonable people to put their, their hand on the table and say enough is enough.
Ahmed Fattouh, it was brilliant to speak to you. Thank you for your time with me this evening.
It's a pleasure.
Let's take a look at some of the other headlines making the news today. 5 police officials have been killed in Pakistan after their van was ambushed. The vehicle was first struck by explosives before attackers opened fire. No group has claimed the attack, which comes as relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan collapse. Pakistan is struggling with the resurgence of militant violence. At least 5 people, including a 2-year-old child, have died after a Mexican Navy plane crashed in Galveston Bay. The aircraft was carrying 8 people, including medical patients. Authorities are now investigating the cause of the crash. President Trump has announced the US will launch a new series of battleships named after himself, dubbed the Golden Fleet. Construction on the first, the USS Defiant, is expected to begin soon, with the vessel set to be operational in around 2.5 years. And finally, the co-creator of Call of Duty, Vince Zampella, has died in a car crash. The 55-year-old was traveling in a Ferrari when it caught fire on a Los Angeles highway with another person who did also die. It is not clear if Zampella was driving the car, which veered off the road, hit a concrete barrier, and then engulfed into flames. Now, Japan is preparing to restart the world's largest nuclear power plant. It's part of the government's plan to reduce its dependence in imported energy after it shut down all nuclear reactors in the country following the 2011 Fukushima tsunami and also meltdown. The decision is highly controversial, with hundreds protesting the restart of the reactor in the country's neighbouring Nagita region. Chris Gilbert reports.
Outside Niigata's prefectural assembly, anger and fear. Around 300 protesters gathered in the cold, holding banners reading "No nukes" and chanting "Never forget Fukushima's lessons." Among them, 52-year-old Ayako Oga, who remains a Fukushima evacuee.
I honestly feel terrified by the fact that people who have already suffered mental, physical, and economic damage due to the Fukushima nuclear disaster may face the risk of experiencing another nuclear accident.
Inside, lawmakers were passing a vote of confidence in Niigata's governor, who approved the restart of the Kashiwazaki Kariwa nuclear plant scheduled for January, while opponents yelled from the public gallery, ignoring the signs calling for silence. The plant, located on the Sea of Japan, about 200 kilometers northwest of Tokyo, is the world's largest, with a capacity of 8.2 gigawatts. It will be the first Tokyo Electric Power Company nuclear plant to go back online since the company admitted mishandling the 2011 Fukushima disaster.
Our company has maintained a strong determination to never allow an accident like Fukushima to happen again. We also firmly believe that the people of Niigata should never have to experience anything like that.
The company, TEPCO, has pledged about $641 million of investment in the prefecture over the next decade, but the company's reputation remains tarnished. Surveys show 60% of residents do not believe the company has met the conditions for restart. Nearly 70% are worried about TEPCO operating the plant. Japan spent $68 billion on imported gas and coal last year. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is pushing nuclear power to strengthen energy security and reduce reliance on imported fossil fuels, which account for up to 70% of the country's electricity. Regardless of the public reservations, the government wants to double nuclear's output by 2040. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
US President Donald Trump spoke out after the release of thousands of Jeffrey Epstein files, defending former President Bill Clinton and warning that other highly respected people who had met Epstein could be unfairly targeted. Trump called the photos terrible and said many people crossed paths with Epstein innocently. He also criticized Democrats for focusing on the files, calling it a distraction. For more on this, I'm joined by Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute at the University of Dublin. Scott, as always, thank you so much for joining me. I just want to start. So we got this tranche of Epstein files today, 11,000 pages. And it was interesting. The DOJ says that some of the latest documents released from the Epstein files contained untrue and sensationalist claims made about President Trump. Why was this statement released?
Because it's political spin for damage control. I mean, it's always best to go to the facts as we know them that come out. So out of the latest tranche of files, when it comes to Trump, first of all, it is established factually that Trump was on Jeffrey Epstein's airplane 8 times in the 1990s. On one occasion, he and Epstein were on there, and the only other passenger was a 20-year-old woman. And prosecutors said that at least 2 potential witnesses in a future case against Jeffrey Epstein, against Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's associate, were also present. So that doesn't establish that Trump was involved in any criminal activity, but it does establish he had proximity to either victims or to witnesses to what Epstein was doing. Secondly, there is an exchange between Epstein and the disgraced U.S. Gymnastics team Dr. Larry Nassar, who was convicted of sexual abuse, talking about, like us, Donald Trump likes young, nubile girls. Their quote, young, nubile girls, and also making a reference to Trump's very lewd practice of accosting women, something we knew about from the Access Hollywood tape. So again, it doesn't prove criminal activity, but that reference to young, nubile girls is troubling. And then what may be most important is the files that disappeared. Last night, the Justice Department initially released the files and then they withdrew them after only a few hours. But a couple of news organizations downloaded them in that time. And there were documents that referred to memoranda after Epstein's death in 2019 by prosecutors. These documents, 7-page document, considered charges against co-conspirators who may have been involved in Epstein's crimes. That was updated in December of 2019 with an 85-page document. There was a 13-page document about possible corporate charges, and there was a 26-page document about a particular target who might be charged. Now, we don't have the actual memoranda themselves, but the references to these memoranda establishes they do exist, and they back up the claims, for example, the Republican Representative Thomas Massey, that there may be 20 men who are named in these files who have so far escaped prosecution.
So, Scott, this is a very complicated argument at the moment when it comes to the Epstein files. Donald Trump has always said that he is innocent. And we've, of course, seen many men, high-profile ones, Bill Clinton himself. We've seen countless figures. No. So what I think is the big question here is how much would this damage Donald Trump's reputation and those men featured in those files, like Bill Gates, like Bill Clinton, like Trump himself, because it's very difficult to know if they knew anything.
I think you're absolutely right to establish that the files do not establish, from what we've seen so far, the connection of any of these high-profile men to Jeffrey Epstein's activities. The issue at the moment is whether, in fact, we are getting the transparency and the accountability that the victims deserve. The Justice Department was required by law to release these documents last Friday. It did not do so. It is required within 15 days to give an explanation of the redactions, the blackouts in the documents. It has not provided any explanation for any of the redactions or any context for what they've released. In some cases, documents have been entirely redacted, such as an important grand jury document in 2019 from the New York prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. There is a 60-count felony document which has not been released, and an 85-page document of evidence behind that indictment, which has not been released. We're getting a drip feed of documents, but we have suspicions. Are we being given everything? And those suspicions are coming from the victims themselves. And this has been compounded by the initial release, the initial handling of this, as you show some of these photos. The White House is keen to get the media to focus on the celebrity photographs, which you are seeing here. Look at Bill Gates, look at Mick Jagger, look at Michael Jackson, look especially at Bill Clinton. 2 Justice Department officials lied on social media that the photographs of Clinton showed that he might be involved in criminal activity. That photo you're showing right now, they said it was of Michael Jackson and Bill Clinton with children. It was not. It was Bill Clinton and Michael Jackson with Michael Jackson's children, a completely innocent photograph. So it's the spin and the potential cover-up that is troubling at this point. Again, not primarily for Donald Trump's reputation, but for the question of whether victims will ever get the transparency and accountability they deserve from whomever was involved in the crimes against them.
And it's really interesting that we're talking right now because all day on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen it, the hashtag Trump Epstein cover-up has been trending, and people are saying exactly what you are saying right now to me. So I'm guessing you believe this is a cover-up. And does the redaction that we are seeing, like you say, all of a sudden things have been redacted, they've gone missing, does this create more conspiracy theories out there? And also, you know, when Donald Trump ran for his presidency the second time round, he did say we were going to be a different government. We were going to be transparent. We were going to tell you the truth. So I guess what does this do for all his supporters?
I think that's the important political question, in that he promised during 2024 that all the files would be released. His Attorney General Pam Bondi said they were on her desk in February being reviewed.
And then they went missing. We never heard about them again, did we?
Exactly. And now what you have is the fact is this isn't a question of left versus right or Democrats versus Republicans. There are some Republicans who joined Democrats to force this last month with the bill that demands the release of the documents. So what you have are a lot of people who have supported Donald Trump, but at the same time, they believe these files were going to come out, especially that they might find that they were Democrats in the files. And when they don't come out, they have a choice. Do they continue to support their man, Donald Trump, or do they support transparency? Do they support the need to get some type of justice in this case? And I think that's going to be the political question, which is going to affect Trump's base going into 2026.
Yeah, Scott Lucas, I think we're going to be talking about the story for a lot longer because it's extremely interesting. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Leigh-Ann.
And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora will be coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for watching.